scum. Yeah, no taxation without representation.
Many know the basis behind the story of the Boston Tea Party. However, few know what truly happened. Why did Boston become the central location for the revolution? What caused this domino to fall? Americans claimed their freedom, and it may have been all thanks to the eye-opening events approaching the Tea Party.
Parliament repealing the Townshend Acts was the first event that erupted the anger that fueled the motive behind the Boston Tea Party. All of the taxes included in it were repealed apart from the tax on tea. This essentially forced lower-class people who wanted to resort to smuggling cheap tea from countries like Germany into the colonies just so they could enjoy a cup. Their other option was to buy tea that was shipped from Britain, which was an unlikely choice for the colonists to make because they would have to pay the tax that came along with it.
As you all very well may know, the East India Company is financially failing. Our government is deeply invested in the company, and we cannot afford to lose the bankruptcy. In response, our fellow colleagues have proposed to impose a tea tax upon the American colonies, entitled the Tea Act. This act will solely and immensely drive down the price of the East India Company tea. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The tea has been passed. It will go into effect as soon as the word has reached the colonies. By increasing profit from the tea, it will only prevent the East India Company from failure, but it will also make our beloved country, Great Britain, to financially prosper.
Colonists became very creative with the way they smuggled tea. Some would hide crates of tea under the wooden floorboards of their boats. Others would hide them in caves and even stuff them under their wives' bellies, as though they were carrying a child. Another common way was just to grab a crate and run as fast as they could to try to hide it somewhere that was safe. The fine was high if they were caught smuggling tea, which is why they became very good at sneaking it. All of these efforts was to try to avoid buying British tea. If it meant that the East India Company was going to fail, and Britain along with it, the colonists did not mind taking such measures to get their tea.
The East India Company was failing financially and was on the brink of bankruptcy. They had very little people buying their tea, which eventually caused a great surplus of tea. If they sold it, they knew they would escape bankruptcy. The company was financed by Great Britain. Therefore, if the company failed, Britain would lose great sums of money as well. Their plan to solve the problem was to keep the tax on imported tea that was established from the Townshend Act, but tremendously drop tax on tea only imported from the East India Company. It was so unbelievably cheap to purchase the tea that even the prices of smuggled tea could not compare. Therefore, on May 10th of 1773, the Tea Act was passed and forced onto the colonies. While they believed they had a well-thought-out plan, there was one missing piece of the puzzle: the colonists. All people became outraged that their tea was so expensive in comparison to scum British tea. They did not want to purchase it, regardless of the price, because they knew Parliament's motive was to earn profit. They believed Great Britain never had the American colonies' interest in mind, and this act was another one of those moments.
Why, look here, what in God's name is this doing here? Why, I'll be damned. It's the dark smell. These British fools really think we're gonna compensate for this tea? For what? To save their precious tea company?
British never stop, do they? Constantly, there's new taxes, new acts. One will come to an end.
Quite truthfully, We shall organize a meeting and discuss the ships and the new tax, or shall I say lack of tax. We cannot sit by peacefully and watch Parliament destroy our nation's worth with their taxes.
Samuel Adams was one of the main contributors to the efforts to rebel against Britain. Because of his clever and strategic ways, he, along with ideas and opinions of other sons of liberty, led the colonists during the entirety of the party, from meeting to meeting. Before the arrival of the first ship, the people of Boston didn't believe that Boston would go through with their plans on putting a tax on tea. However, after the Dartmouth docked in the port of Boston, things were taken seriously. This led Adams to call for the first colonist meeting. Colonists at first were extremely furious and confused. However, with the assistance of Sam Adams, they were able to settle down and find a resolution.
Appreciate keeping order. Now, any opinions about the recent tea tax that was enforced onto our colonies?
This is ridiculous!
This is absolutely absurd.
Damn you, Brit! People, please settle down. We can all sit here and whine and complain about the situation, but it's not going to get us anywhere. Let's turn quarrels into action.
The man is right. We must take action.
Rebellion! Right, the British can enforce their taxes all they want, but nothing will touch Boston as long as I live.
They think that just because this tax makes tea cheaper, we are just going to comply like mindless rats and purchase all of their tea?
No!
We darn right aren't. We need to show them that we aren't their puppets and they can't impose all of these taxes on us. We too are British citizens and deserve to be treated and respected as such.
We are not going to pay the taxes on that ship's tea. We will not stand to obey these British scum any longer.
We haven't even had any representation, no discussion, no reasoning with our representatives. All we received were their taxes and their acts.
The British saw the colonists as a source for their profits. After all, that was the original purpose of the colonies. When the East India Company had too much tea on their hands, the British levied a tax that actually made tea cheaper for the colonists. However, the colonists did not view the case in the same perspective. They were fed up with their lack of representation, and they believed the only communication they had with the British was when they complained about a new tax or law. They were no longer willing to comply with what was forced upon them, although they had boycotted prior to the Tea Act. This time was seen as the last straw. We have faced the arrival of two other ships, the Eleanor and the Beaver. With so many ships, we must find a way to avoid unloading a single crate of tea and avoid paying a single penny for them. The payment is to be made no later than December 17th, so we only have a few days to complete any task we set out to do.
We all have to make this effective. We need to show the British that they cannot push us around to the certain point, that we won't stand anymore. We have held our hand out for peace, and they have rejected it sourly. They rejected our olive branch petition, and after refusing it, we have to show them that we will rise against.
No taxation without representation needs to be a cry heard from our colonies to its throne. If Parliament won't treat us like people, we won't act as such. We will act like animals.
We need to organize a more detailed plan, and it will have to be carefully constructed as well. I've tried negotiating with everyone from the governor to the owner of the Dartmouth himself. There are very little options, if any, to turn to. I will talk to the member of the Sons of Liberty, who I am sure will consent to any actions we believe are necessary.
Now let us formulate our plan. This must be done immediately.
Arrival of the other two ships, every Bostonian agreed that something must be done to stop the British. Many people had also attempted to negotiate with the men controlling the ships, such as Francis Roch, owner of the Dartmouth, to request permission to depart from the port without paying the tax first. Offers were rejected, and even when owners such as Roch offered to try to negotiate, no one was successful with Governor Hutchinson. Residents of Boston saw they had no choice but to move past legal and reasonable options and develop an effective plan.
At this point, the British were at the peak of their anger. They were ready to fight back to the British. They believed that they could conquer anything that Parliament threw at them, and they were about to prove themselves. Several colonists dressed up as Indians the night of the Tea Party to disguise their identities. They boarded the ships and dumped every single tea-carrying crate on all three ships. This was an unofficial battle against the British and the colonists, and the British had been defeated.
This is it. This is what we've been fighting for. We are the sons of our nation. Let's go fight for what we believe in.
Yeah, you're right. We can't let these British rule us any longer.